All right, folks, so today we're going to do a short video on, well, this might not end up being very short, on the segregation of explosives. So before we start talking about the actual segregation, I find it's very helpful sometimes to go over how DOT classifies explosives. So DOT basically classifies explosives three different ways. So first, they're going to tell you what the explosive is, right? So that's your proper shipping name. So it's a bomb, it's a cartridge, it's a detonator, it's a mine, it's a grenade, it's a rocket, it's a flare, or whatever it is, right? That's the first thing they give us in our proper shipping name. Then you got your hazard class and division. Now, of course, they're all going to be class 1, but the division in particular tells us what problems does it present on the side of the road. So we look up this bomb's photo flash, it tells us it's a 1.1. That means that if this item's involved in a fire and one detonates, that it's very likely that more than that one will sympathetically detonate, right? If it's 1.2, probably not going to have a sympathetic detonation, but if one detonates, you will have an amount of fragmentation released, right? Of course, 1.3 is your fire hazard, and they go on from there. And then lastly, one that we haven't talked a whole lot about up to this point, just kind of drug it on along, is this compatibility group. So that tells me what it can ship with. Just like the name suggests, it tells me what is it compatible with. And in general, the general rule for this is like compatibility groups go together and unlike compatibility groups don't. So for the most part, if I see a golf, I know I can put it with another golf. So if we see these three guys, there are four golfs right here, then they're in the same compatibility group, they can go together. This Sierra, same compatibility groups, they can go together. And we're going to find that to be the case most of the time. There are 6 exceptions to that, and that's kind of what makes this complicated. So the biggest thing I want to show you here, though, is that we're going to talk a lot about, okay, D's to G's or Sierras to Golfs or whatever the case may be. And a lot of times we forget that just because something is a golf doesn't mean all golfs are the same. That just means all golfs are compatible with each other. So, for example, this golf is a 1.2 golf bomb, right? This one's a 1.2 golf bomb. This one's a 1.3 golf cartridge. Here we've got 1.1 Foxes and 1.1 Deltas. So just understand that when we say a compatibility group, that doesn't mean that everything in that compatibility group is the same. It just means I can put them all in a bucket together, right? So with that in mind, let's take a look. So we look at the compatibility group or the compatibility table. What we see here is kind of the same thing we saw on the first compatibility table. We see a bunch of X's and some blank spaces, right? And they mean the same thing that they did on the first table. X's are bad and blank spaces are good. And as I said, general terms are that X's or like compatibility groups can go together and unlike compatibility groups can't. And that's why you see a whole bunch of X's on this table. And it's why the only blank spaces are where compatibility groups meet each other. Right? Juliet to Juliet, Echo to Echo, all of that is blank. Now, that is until we get down to Lima. And Lima is the first exception to this rule. And Lima is the only place where like compatibility groups don't go together. And I'm going to try in this video not to get real wonky into why that is. And you know, there's a bunch of 80-pound brains at the DOT that have figured all this out so you don't have to, right? You could certainly, my email's and my contact information. If you want more details, you can certainly send those questions to me and I'll gladly answer them. And I may make a slightly more detailed video to go into that, but it won't be this one. So basically, Lima to Lima, for a Lima to go with a Lima, they have to be an identical Lima. So in your mind, think of it this way. If I've got a pallet of the same item, same NSN, same DOTIC, then they can all go together. But if I have 2 Limas that are not the same NSN and same DOTIC, in other words, they're not the same identical item, then they cannot go together. And it's just that simple. They can have the same UN number. They can have the same hazard class. They can actually have the same basic description, right? Everything be the same, But if they are two different items, then they cannot go together. Because remember, DOT, proper shipping names, are real broad. They're extremely broad terms. So when you look at something like, for example, a rocket. So rocket 0182, 1.2 golf, that covers anything from a penny rocket that you buy on the side of the road at the 4th of July to a javelin missile. To the DOT, it's just something that you initiate it travels a certain distance, and it blows up. And so, got to have the same NSN, same DOT. Next, we're going to deal with footnotes 2 and 3. We're going to kind of take this simultaneously. Bottom line is we treat footnote 2 and footnote 3 as a blank space. And the reason we do that is because footnotes 2 and 3 outline the fact that if I have a pile of CDs and E's, I can treat them as an E. If I add 1 November to that, then I have to treat it as a delta. Now, do we care about any of that? No. All we want to know is, can they go together? Can they not go together? Now, this is going to affect us a little bit in placarding later on, but we'll deal with that problem when we get there. So for the time being, we're just going to treat footnote 2 and footnote 3 as a blank space. And you'll see that they are where C, D, and E intersect with each other, and then they're where C, D, and E intersect with November, right? So far, so good. Pretty simple. X's are bad, blank spaces are good. 1 means lemma goes with an identical lemma. Footnotes 2 and 3 are good to go, right? Footnote 4, slightly more complicated. So footnote, up until this point, all we've needed to know is what is the compatibility group to know how our items are going to be segregated, right? Now, once we get to footnote 4, 5, and 6, we need to know a little bit more than that. So we're going to need to know its proper shipping name. We're also going to need to know its division, right? So we got to get a little bit deeper. And the reason why is because footnotes 4, 5, and 6 deal with detonators in footnote 4, and 5 and 6 deal with fireworks. So we treat detonators and fireworks kind of with kid gloves because they can initiate other things. And so these are the rules in dealing with those. So we'll look at footnote 4. We find footnote 4 at the intersection of Sierra and pretty much everything else, right? And what footnote 4 says is that if your Sierra is a detonator, then it gets put in its own motor vehicle, okay? There are 2 exceptions to that. That Sierra can ride with another detonator, right? That Sierra detonator, it can ride with another detonator, and that's okay. And it can ride with any 1.4 as long as that 1.4 is not core detonating. And I recognize that language can get pretty ticky, but I assure you it's far more ticky once you go into 177.848 and read it. But the bottom line is, if I've got a Sierra and that Sierra is a detonator, then it gets on its own motor vehicle. And the only exceptions to that, the only thing I can put it with or put with it, or detonators, other detonators, in other words, proper shipping name detonator, and I can stick any 1.4 on there as long as it's not det cord, right? So if I've got 1.4 cartridges, 1.4 flares, 1.4 anything, they can go with my Sierra detonator. So in the example we have here, we've got this 1.1 detonator. So Sierra to Bravo. Sierra to Bravo gives me the 4, 5, and we're going to deal with 5 in a minute, but dealing with 4, my 4 is a detonator, so it gets its own truck, except that it can go with detonators. So my 1.4 Sierra could go with this 1.1 Bravo detonator. It could not go with this Charlie charges, because that's not one of the 2 things it gets to ride with, right? Simple as that. So here we're good with the 1.4 Sierra detonator can ride. Here, this cannot ride, right? Now, if we change that up a little bit, and what if my 1.4 Sierra is not a detonator? What if my Sierra is a blasting cap? Not a blasting cap. That is a detonator. What if my 1.4 Sierra is cartridges or flares or anything other than detonators? Well, in that case, footnote 4 does not apply. And we hadn't talked about footnote 5 yet, but that pertains to fireworks. So I've got these cartridges. They're not a detonator. They're not a firework. They can go with either one of these without exception. So I have no issues there. So that's kind of how footnote 4 works. So remember, we get into footnote 4. Now we don't just need to know the compatibility group. Now we need to know the proper shipping name. Okay. All right. Footnote 5 deals with fireworks. It's a lot simpler, frankly. It says if my Sierra is a firework, then it can't go with a 1.1 or 1.2, and it doesn't matter what that 1.1 or 1.2 is. So here I need to know the proper shipping name of my Sierra, and I need to know the divisions of my other two items, right, or whatever else I'm trying to put it with. So in this case, I could not put the firework with either one of these. Simple as that. Fireworks can't go with 1.1s and 1.2s, right? And then finally, the last footnote is footnote 6. 6 also pertains to fireworks. Now, the difference between 5 and 6 fireworks, Sierra fireworks are what you buy on the side of the road, right? They're the little penny rockets. If you look at the DOT definition, DOT says a firework is a low explosive designed for entertainment purposes, right? It is what you watch on the 4th of July. Don't confuse this with military pyrotechnics. We know that a firework's a firework by its proper shipping name. If the proper shipping name says firework, that's what it is. Don't confuse that with military pyrotechnics like starlight clusters or flashbangs. Now, I will concede that it is very entertaining to throw flashbangs at people who are not expecting them. But that's not the purpose of a flashbang, right? So if it doesn't say firework in the proper shipping name, not a firework. The golf fireworks that we're talking about here, these are your larger fireworks. These are the fireworks that you might see at a large display on base or being fired off a barge somewhere, something like that. These are bigger fireworks, but they're fireworks nonetheless. So what footnote 6 says is that these fireworks, these golf fireworks, are not going to be allowed to go with CDs and E's. So if reword that just a little bit, CD and E can ship with a golf unless that golf is a firework. So if my golf is a firework, like this one is, it cannot go with this Charlie. But if my golf were a grenade, it could go with the Charlie. If my golf were a cartridge, it could go with the Charlie. That kind of thing. So this is, again, and when we get to footnotes 4, 5, and 6, the compatibility group's no longer enough. Now I need to know my division and my proper shipping name to know what's going to go with what, right? So I hope this helps. Hope this made sense to you. If you have any questions, you got my email. Use it. Thank you.